and welcome to Acceptable Madness, the podcast about depression. My name is Scott McKinney, and I'm going to be your host. That is a bit too formal for what I actually want to sound like. That was a little douchey, but that's okay. It's kind of a learning process. I'll figure it out along the way. If I'm being honest, I mean, it's very obvious that these podcasts are ad-libbed, and I just kind of come in and say whatever I want to say or feel like saying at that given moment. So again, bear with me. I said it in the last episode, I think. Just bear with me as I try to get used to it. The flow of just talking to a microphone is not something that's that feels very usual to me. It just feels a bit strange, so it's taking some time to get that level of comfort up there. And honestly, it's weird. So I started this podcast. This is episode number 2. I know, it's phenomenal. I've done a great job so far, but I have a lot that I want to do with this, and it's weird because I don't really know where to start. Because I mean, if someone randomly stumbles upon this podcast and they just hear it, their first thought is probably going to be like, why should I listen to this guy who hasn't really done anything? He's not like a public advocate. I've never heard of his name before. I've never heard his voice before this podcast, and I don't know anything about him. So I don't want to dive into any of the heavy hitting topics of depression yet. There's clearly a lot, an infinite amount of topics. I could go on for the rest of my life just talking about depression itself. But I kind of want to tell you a little bit more about how I got to this point of thinking that I should be the kind of person that starts a podcast. And the way that I got to this point, the reason that I think that I could be the kind of person that starts a podcast is because I am fully aware that I am not special in any way. And that's such an odd thought, because I know that whenever in the past I would think about, I have these suicidal thoughts, or like I should just go kill myself, and all of these ranges of thoughts go through my head, hanging, shooting, jumping, any of those very, very, very negative things that are really unhealthy to have going through your head. They went through, and I felt very alone, and it took me a really long time to figure out that I'm not special whenever it comes to those thoughts, and that a lot of people have those thoughts. It's so weird. It's a double-edged sword, because I don't feel special, which is great because it means that other people are going through the same thing, which means that I could probably find some sort of common ground with people, and I know that it's not the end of the world, and I know that it doesn't have to escalate to something that's like an irreversible damage that would influence, a lot of people's lives going forward. I'm talking about suicide. I don't know why it sounded like I was beating around the bush there, but at the same time, so I'm glad that I'm not alone, but at the same time, I wish that I was, in a sense, because I really don't like these thoughts. They're really not helpful. They make me feel insane a lot of the time. One of the few books that I've read, I've read 15 this year, so I still have a ways to go in terms of becoming an avid reader. But I read I read Turtles All the Way Down by John Green. And I actually thought, I'm not the biggest fan of his writing style. I didn't love it. I didn't think it was anything spectacular. But I liked what he went for with the whole spiraling. And if you haven't read the book, I'd recommend it if you think that, if you're relating to this podcast at all. Again, episode 2, so there's only so much to relate to. But I found it very helpful, because you could tell that it was going from a very personal place of his. And I had heard and read interviews of his whenever he was on the campaign tour for the book, and whenever he talked about it, I always kind of thought he was full of shit, because I was like, okay, well, I'm depressed too, why are you special? And then he's not, but he wrote a book about it, and it kind of puts it into common terms that other people can associate and identify with. So I don't know, I guess that's kind of a tangent, but basically what I'm saying is, it sucks that I deal with it, it sucks that you deal with it, it sucks that everybody deals with it. No one should have to go through it. It's a pain in the ass, and it sucks. But what that does mean is that if you're going through it, you know that you can turn to people that are also going through it, that are a bit more outspoken, or have figured out more steps along the way of how to get to a better, more comfortable place. And I think that's like 90% of the battle. So I went to one thing I actually did whenever I was in college. I've only been out of college it's been less than a year at this point, but I went to the on campus like personal counseling, and I met with this guy. And the first time I went in there, I was convinced it's like, okay, well, it's winter, and I went to a college in Erie, Pennsylvania, so the snow is really bad. We get it a lot. You don't see the sun for like 9 months out of the year. And I was convinced that it was seasonal depression. I was like, okay, well, this just makes sense. I haven't seen the sun. I know that it's a thing that exists, and I am absolutely miserable all the time. So I went to see him to talk about it. And I got a sun lamp, which was supposed to replicate the sound or the feeling of the sun and make you feel a little bit better. And I gave that a shot for a little bit. It wasn't bad. To me, it felt more like it was like a pseudoscience. Like, I don't know if it was helping. It might have just had some placebo effect on me. Either way, it helped a little bit. But some of the other stuff that he told me was that he was convinced, and this is from someone in the therapy and counseling field, he was convinced that depression, it isn't necessarily real. And I know that that's not exactly what he said. But basically, his thought was it's more of a how you think about depression or how you think about the world around you, as opposed to this chemical imbalance in your brain or just an inability to think happy thoughts. And at first I thought he was onto something, but as I talked to him more and more, it sounded like he was crazy, because no matter what the cause for depression, whether it's negative thoughts, and it started by an inability to see the world in a happier light, or whatever the reason is, it's still legitimate. And saying that depression doesn't exist really minimizes it minimizes the person suffering through it. I like to write, so something I want to talk about a little bit is I really, really, really like to write, and I found that out within like 2 years ago. And I know that a lot of people like to write, and it's a really good emotional outlet. And for me, it turned into being a very good one. That's why I started this podcast too. Like, it's on the blog that I started called Acceptable Madness, and all I do is write depressing shit that my parents probably don't want to read. Not to say that they're unsupportive, but just because it's pretty dark and they don't want to see their son going through this stuff. But I showed it to someone that I see regularly, and she didn't think that my writing was legitimate, even though it has a lot of suicidal thoughts and writings. It has a lot of very negative themes, depressed everything. And she did not like my writing. And whenever I asked why, I'm okay with criticism. I'm okay with someone not liking my writing. I have no problem with that. I thrive off of rejection and criticism because of all the projects that I want to do. But whenever I asked her why she didn't like it, she gave me the response of something that I thought was really, really, it wasn't malicious, but it was a lot more harmful than helpful. So I pour my writing, I pour my heart into my writing, just like I'm sure a lot of people out there do. And, but I really try to focus on the depression side, because if I can write it on paper and if I can show it to someone and try to have them understand it, then, I don't know why, it just makes me feel better. But she read through some of the shorts that I posted on my website. And she didn't find that they were very good. And her reasoning was that because, I'll give an example. One of the things that I've written is called The Step. And it's pretty short. But basically, I created this character, definitely modeled after my own thoughts. And by the end of the short, it's very, very short, like maybe 100 or 200 words. He jumps off a bridge and dies, very simply. And this person told me that she didn't think that it was legitimate because I've never actually jumped off a bridge to try to kill myself. And that blew my mind, and I think that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. And I really hope she's not listening to this podcast. Although if you are, feel free to subscribe. But basically, it blew my mind, because I don't care what the reasoning for having these negative thoughts or why you're having them, or the thought should probably be, I'm glad that you found an outlet and a way to express yourself that is not harmful, as opposed to, I do not totally understand or respect the foundation of your writing because you've never tried to kill yourself. And to me, I mean, going through that depressed spiral that even John Green talks about in his book, or I'm sure everybody out there that has depression has gone through at some point or another, the thought process there is like, okay, well then, if I'm pouring my heart into this writing and you don't think that it's legitimate, wouldn't it make more sense if I was really trying to legitimize my writing based on her standards, that I should do something that is self-harming of some sort? I'm not going to do that. But it's something that went through my mind, where I was like, I don't understand how you could say that to me or someone else and not expect the thought process to go to like, okay, well, if you don't think my writing is legitimate, then I should probably just go kill myself. And it's weird. I know that sounds so, I don't know, just kind of, it's pretty crude, maybe a little bit childish, but honestly, a lot of the thoughts that I have with depression, they feel childish. They feel like things that I should have been able to overcome whenever I was 8. But then I turned like 16 or whatever. I don't know when it started, but you hit puberty, and then all these thoughts that you've never had before and logically don't make any sense, and stuff that you can think about, and every time you think about it, you're just like, this is ridiculous. Like, I shouldn't just kill myself. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world. There's a lot of beneficial things that I can help, or that can help me and everything. But then there's also that side where it's just like, well, I'm currently at this exact moment feeling miserable. I felt this way many times before. Wouldn't it just be easier to no longer exist? And I don't know. Maybe this is just, I know that I'm kind of rambling here. I know that I've jumped around to a lot of different topics, but I don't know. I feel like the more people out there that can talk about their depression and how their particular brand of depression is different, and how they cope with it, can be very helpful. I know that there's a lot of people out there doing it already, and that's great, and I think everybody should be doing it. If they suffer with it and they found a way to deal with it and thrive with it even, then they should be out there telling other people how to do it. Now, I feel like not a lot of people are comfortable doing it, whether it's because of their own insecurity that comes from depression, or just an unwillingness to talk with people. I mean, depending on the day, I hate getting out of bed, just like I'm sure a lot of the listeners out there would. And it's just because your mind is a bastard a lot of the time, and that's basically it. And there's no real rhyme or reason. And I hope that that's comforting to hear, as much as it's as uncomfortable for me to say. And I don't know. It's not the kind of thing that'll just be better overnight. I've tried things that have lasted an entire year, that sometimes they feel like they help and sometimes they feel like they don't. And I've tried stuff very short term that I hoped would have some sort of positive repercussions, but there's never going to be something that makes depression end. And if there is, I would be very skeptical of it, because although depression sucks, it drives a lot of my thoughts, all of my thoughts. And the one thing that I've kind of come to the conclusion of while I've had depression is that I really like me, even though I really, really hate me. And, okay, so this is something that this is something that I don't know if other people would understand, but Kanye West put out a song on one of his newer albums, and he starts it out with just saying repeatedly, I've thought about killing you, or something. Or it's like, I've thought about killing myself, and I like me more than I like you, so I've definitely thought about killing you. And it's just, clearly I'm paraphrasing. But I thought that even though Kanye has a really polarized audience, I thought that that was a specifically interesting line because how, one, willing he was to just admit that. That's not hyperbolic. That's something that he's genuinely thought. And how, even though the quality of the song, I don't like that particular song very much, it isn't necessarily the best, but it's something that's out there, and it's something like that to me is a lot more helpful than, I really don't like, for example, Logic did a song with Alicia, and the title was The Suicide Hotline Number, and I thought the way that they portrayed depression and how to go get help was a bit more, I don't want to say harmful, but it definitely wasn't helpful. It felt it felt like it was minimalizing the thoughts that go into depression, and that's one thing that should not be done. I know a lot of people with it constantly think that their thoughts don't matter and their voice doesn't matter. But I'm thinking that right now. I literally said that, and the inner Scott is going, then shut the fuck up. No one needs to hear your voice. But the other side of me is like, I really hope this is connecting with someone. The weird train of thoughts that I've had are incoherent, and that's just how my brain works, and there's a lot of different connecting and non-connecting pieces in particular podcast, but it's just a way to look into my mind a little bit. I don't want to be I don't want to make podcasts talking about the really hard-hitting topics, or even the minor topics related to depression, if I don't feel like I'm a credible source, and I want to be a credible source by just kind of putting myself out there. And so if it sounds like I'm rambling a little bit, then I apologize, but that's just also at the same time how my brain works, and I'm sure that a lot of other people's brains work the exact same way. So yeah, I guess that's episode number 2. Let's see what we covered today. Basically nothing, but also basically a lot of things. Maybe? I have no idea. So, I don't know. Next week I'll try to have something that's a bit more basic and with a bit more direction. I have a lot of different ideas that I want to pursue, and there have been a lot of different things that I've tried to reduce depression or to stop it or to do all this other stuff, but again, I don't want to just be some guy talking into a microphone. I want to be able to at least show a little bit that I'm at least with you on this one and going through the same thing. And maybe I don't have the fame or notoriety as someone like, I don't know, just some celebrity, literally name a single one. But I still think that maybe someone will find some solace in what I'm saying, and that's all I really hope for. I do a lot of different projects, and I've written books, all fiction, because that's what I like to write. I'm trying this podcast. I have my blog up and stuff, and the whole goal is just to impact one person. That's it, because that's all that really matters. And again, I know that I said that in episode 1. I want to impact one person, whether it's myself or you, but that's all I can hope for. So, again, next week will be a bit more coherent, have a bit more thought behind it, but this is a starting point. So, welcome to Scott McKinney of Acceptable Madness. I hope you enjoy it. Have a good rest of your day.